Welcome, Left Reckoners. I'm Matt Leck. With me, or actually without me, David Griscom, but with me, Alessandro and Naomi from Missoula, Montana. A place I've actually never been. I've been, let me get in focus here. I've been to Montana a couple times. I am a fan of Montana, at least the eastern part of the state that I've been to. But Alessandro and Naomi, introduce yourselves and what you're up to in Montana. We can start with you, Alessandro.
Alessandro, I am involved in housing unions here, the Tenants Union, the Unhoused Neighbors Union, and I'm also doing a lot of things at the DSA chapter here. The big project I'm taking on right now is sort of restarting our environmental committee or eco-socialist committee, which the activity sort of seemed to die down for a while, but understanding that environmentalism and the climate change is probably the issue of our time, I felt like it was something that needed to be going on here, especially with all of the nonprofits being in a very nonprofit dense place to take advantage of all of that activity. There's various other things going on at the DSA. We formed a social outreach group to kind of like embed socialism more into the community here. And we have a lecture series that we're starting where we want to get, socialists from all over the country, but even locally who are prominent involved. So the first talk is going to be on the 1st at the library here. And our socialist city councilor, Daniel Carlino, is going to be doing that one. So I'll be helping him along with that. And I think I might be hosting it alongside him. I'm not sure yet.
Oh, very nice. So that's in Missoula. Naomi, how about you?
Hi, Naomi. I work with the Missoula Tenants Union as well, and the Unhoused Neighbors Union. I do direct services, and I've been tinkering with some other areas like arts and comms and the right to counsel work. And
it's a legislative campaign.
It's a legislative campaign, and then also I am working with the environmental group through the DSA.
So let's start with housing, because that's something, we had Nick Bolin on and we talked about. I think maybe putting it all on COVID is too much, but post-COVID influx of maybe wealthier people into the Montana, Wyoming areas, and housing just generally not, the supply not being there, and rents going up massively high. Like I know a bunch of people who work seasonal jobs in Montana at sort of the lodges and stuff like that, and a lot of those, the housing's not great there. So yeah, just both of you, as tenant organizing and organizers around the issue of housing, what observations do you have from Montana?
It is almost impossible to work a median wage job and afford a rental here.
Even with a studio.
Yeah. I think that is it a one bedroom apartment. The average price is $1,200 a month for rent.
$1,600.
Yeah. And so of course, where you see house, the sort of the influx of a more wealthy population that you've seen here, sort of a liberal managerial type, you see the general trend of gentrification, that the native population gets pushed out, and it's what's led to the houseless crisis that's here. There's an obvious correlation between the two things.
Airbnb.
I think.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead. Airbnb.
Yeah, we have a rise of Airbnbs, which is a really huge problem. If you were to get rid of the Airbnbs and rent them out, we would be able to house almost all the houseless here.
Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with what the Bozeman Tenants Union has been doing, but we have sort of Bozeman envy here with how well they've been able to organize. And we've been trying to communicate with them and learn from them as much as possible. But they were able, I believe last year, through their city commission to pass an Airbnb ban. And the Airbnbs were grandfathered in, but there can't be any more after that. So that's a pretty substantial success, I would say.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess that the air is taking. What sort of initiatives is it mainly taking? Airbnb? Is it agitating for sort of public housing? What are sort of the issues there?
I don't feel that our union is developed enough on its analysis to really sort of engage in this discussion. But there are entities around here that are involved in things like this. There's a zoning project here called Pro Housing Missoula, and there's some overlap between our tenants union and that entity, and it's all sort of based on density and taking, say single family homes and cutting them up into fourplexes and sixplexes and things like that. So that it's a purely increase of increasing supply to bring the price down. And we, as more lefty sort of people, don't want to, I don't know that the ideal way of living is for everyone to be living in these little boxes that, a lot of like the sort of, liberal utopian type of people would prescribe, some of which have come up with the prescription at Pro Housing Missoula, let's say. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm just fascinated by that element of it because I've heard a lot about KC tenants, and I know Julia Salazar, DSA elected here in Brooklyn, was a tenant organizer. I'm curious, talk a little bit more about tenant organizing, where people are at, the type of conversations you have, and how it's. I guess Alessandro, you've been in Montana, for a while, for a little bit. But just talk about how the community meets that organizing.
Yeah, so at the beginning of this year, our tenants union formed a central committee, basically, and we set a few goals. And one of them was to actually begin unionizing in buildings. Our tenant union had been established for a few years without having gotten to that as a goal or something that should be worked on. So early this year, that formed, and I was in those meetings saying, trying to proletarianize the organization, basically. Like, we have a demographic problem. We're all sort of white, middle-class college graduates, and I don't think that's, how we can have a successful sort of revolutionary organization. And so, the goal was to organize 3 buildings this year, and we've done that. And we got notified by Fair Housing here, which deals with they sort of oversee and enforce HUD, federal level discrimination laws. And they reached out to another person in the tenant union about an opportunity over at Eagle Watch Estates, which is across from our homeless shelter here in town, and has an out-of-state landlord, nonprofit landlord named Accessible Space Incorporated. And that was the first thing that we took on. So far, that's been a really big success for us. That's where I met Naomi. Naomi's mom lives there. So we started sort of combing through and surveying all of the issues in the building. And then we sent out a demand letter in the spring. And then we got sort of a non-answer from the landlord. And we responded by having a press conference, and we drew on all of our contacts in the community to come there, press contacts. And then we had Arthur Pettit, who is the field worker for John Tester, show up there. And I got his contact info. And he said that he would ask Tester if he could contact HUD for us. So through that connection, he got Tester to work on HUD. And then a couple months later, into the early summer, I think the end of June, HUD came and did their own inspections at Eagle Watch. And that was another sort of successful escalation. We seized on that moment as well. We called up everyone that we knew in the press and said, hey, this is happening now. It's evolving. And then we also kind of staged a little protest where we had people in town. We sort of made a call for people to come and hold signs so that would be sort of more of a story for the press. And that added pressure from HUD started to create a lot more, activity around repairs in the building. But of course, landlords are going to be landlords, and you have to keep pressing on them. There's no let up. And as I say, the fight probably never ends. So for the rest of the summer, we were keeping track of things. And then I kind of laid the hammer down 2 weeks ago. We collected everything that hasn't been done in the building, that has been done poorly, and just other sort of rumors that are floating around the residents were concerned about. And I compiled them all in an email, and I CC'd the upper management for ASI, our contact at HUD, who's a field worker from Denver. So she actually flew for the inspection from Denver here to Missoula earlier in the summer. And then I CC'd in our contact from Fair Housing. And then by the end of that week, the regional manager got fired.
That's awesome. Naomi, I'm curious your experiences or any observations you have on this same front. I find this really fascinating because when I was in North Dakota, Rick Berg, when he was running for the state representative or for the representative of North Dakota, everyone knew him as a landlord, and there was this consciousness among people like fuck these guys. But there wasn't the organizing, I think, at that point, and so I think it's just great to see people doing actually the work.
Yeah, well, we've learned a lot from it. There's been we've done a lot right. And so we've been able to learn from that and start building on that to work in other areas. And now we're unionizing another place.
Trailer park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the difference is that there are different laws for trailer parks. So we've been having to really delve into understanding those, the people's rights there. But we're carrying forward a lot of what we learned from Eagle Watch, what worked and what didn't work. Sorry, my cat.
That's so good.
So yeah, we pick things up, tactics and things from one effort, and we bring them into another. Or for instance, I'll take people who I've developed relationships from tenant organizing and then roll them into other unionizing efforts, and back and forth.
Right. Yeah. No, that's fascinating. And let's also talk about this environmental stuff. You mentioned the NGOs. There's a lot of NGOs in Montana, are there?
Yeah, especially in Missoula. From what I understand, Missoula has more nonprofits per capita than anywhere else in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh, wow.
I have an opinion as, I don't know, some sort of heterodox or unorthodox Leninist that we should, as socialists, seize on all of the resources that we have around us and draw them into our movement. So that's very much like an approach of what I'm doing with the environmental group, is having something that's led by socialists, but we're sourcing information from wherever we can. There are people dealing with the problem, no matter, what their background, if it's nonprofit or business or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talk a little bit more about that. Like what, because my experience with I've seen a lot of hostility. I come from hunters in North Dakota, so my first experience of the environmental NGO was, and I'm blanking, Sierra Club, which hunters just hate. But yeah, I'm curious. Like, what are some observations about I like the idea of they are producing information about this stuff. I'm just talk a little bit more about that.
Well, it's the nature of all nonprofits, no matter what they do, that they work on things in a very fragmented nature, and they are never going to come up with solutions that step outside of the current economic paradigm. So you take those limitations into understanding. And what as a socialist or as a communist, what I think should be done is the sort of centralizing of all of that information and adding on top, the insights that you get when you're not limited by profit maximization as as really the goal when it comes to it.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like, am I wrong to say the environment stuff is a little bit tougher than the tenant stuff to get people to key in on?
Yeah.
It's tough because like I went to bed last night freaking out about some NASA information about how much the northern hemisphere is taking. Like I hate this stuff, but it's also it is maybe more demoralizing. Or tenant stuff, like I want to stay living here. I don't want to be booted out of this place. Although there's some relationship to those things.
Well, yeah, because houses are built on land and are intermingled with surrounding environment. The interconnectedness of everything. The interaction between the built and the natural environment is obviously a key thing here. But yeah, there's no doubt that I think, in my opinion, the tenant organizing has enormous revolutionary potential because it is so immediate. It draws in so many different kinds of people because everyone needs housing. Every social category of individual needs housing, right? So and then also tying it into the fact that your house and where you live is on land, and that land is despoiled. And it's been we've had a crazy summer of environmental problems here. We had a storm that ripped through here back in July, was it? Yeah, and it tore down hundreds of trees. And people who have lived here for a long time never seen anything like it. Was like a 10-minute hurricane, like Category 4 hurricane that just ripped through the town in 10 minutes. A ton of stuff was destroyed. The power was out for days for many people. I went 3 days without power. And then also the droughts are crazy too. Until it kind of snapped into fall here last week, we were, the AQI was in the 160s or 170s for a week or more. And I think I understand that we had the 4th worst air quality in the country during that time.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it occurs to me. I mean, you got Glacier National Park up there. I imagine there's some melting issues going on. When I was in Red Lodge 2 years ago, I forget the river there, but it had overrun its banks, and there was massive damage to that downtown there too. And I remember seeing how fast it was still flowing on a hike, and it was, I mean, obviously there's seasonality to this, but I don't remember it flowing quite as crazy as that. And yeah, Montana, like every other place, susceptible to these sorts of changes. Anything else you guys want to discuss while we have you?
Anything you want to say?
No, I'm good.
Well, there you go. Well, I appreciate.
Yeah, there's so much to say that you can't get it all in a 20-minute segment. So.
No, and Montana's a giant state, but we'll stay tuned. And so the plugs. Where can people follow either tenant organizing stuff, the DSA? I'll link to the Western Montana DSA Instagram. But any place else that we can direct people's attention to?
Yeah, I'll give my Instagram. It's _magician93 on Instagram. Nice. And I think that's pretty much it for now. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for your time today, and also the work you're doing organizing folks. It's really inspiring stuff. And keep in touch.
Yeah, I hope we do.
Thank you.
Take care, Matt.